There's a reason old money women almost never look like they're wearing a full face of makeup, even when they are. It's not because they naturally have perfect skin. It's not because they spend thousands on luxury products. It's because they understand one principle that most modern makeup tutorials completely ignore. Expensive beauty never announces itself. It whispers. If your makeup has ever looked heavy, cakey, or like it's sitting on top of your skin instead of becoming part of it, today's video is for you. Because old money beauty isn't about wearing less makeup. It's about applying it so well that nobody notices the makeup at all. And by the end of this video, I'll show you one tiny technique professional artists use that instantly makes your entire face look more refined. There's a good chance the exact way you were taught to apply your foundation is the reason your makeup reads as makeup instead of skin. And there's one tiny adjustment, almost nobody talks about it, that fixes this instantly. I'm saving it for the very end of this video because once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it in every look you do after this. If you've ever finished a full face of makeup, looked in the mirror and thought, this doesn't really look like me, even though you followed the makeup tutorial exactly, you are nowhere near alone. And it is not because you're bad at makeup. It's because most tutorials show you what to do without ever explaining why it works. So the moment your face, your skin type, or your lighting is even slightly different from the video you watched, the whole thing falls apart. That is exactly what today is about. Not another list of 40 products you're supposed to go out and buy. Just the actual reasoning behind the natural makeup techniques and beauty tips that separate makeup that looks like makeup from makeup that looks like your skin, just better. The kind that gets you look so well rested, instead of, oh, your makeup looks nice today. Whether you're still figuring out beginner makeup basics, or you've been doing this for years and just want it to look more effortless, we're going through this roughly in the order you'd actually get ready, starting with the one thing you do before a single product touches your face, all the way to the adjustment at the end that ties this entire look together. So stay with me, because I think a few things are about to click into place. Here's where I want to start, and it's probably not where you'd expect. Not foundation, not concealer. The single biggest misconception in makeup, the one behind almost every heavy or aged look you've ever scrolled past online, is the belief that more product automatically means more polish. It doesn't. Most of the time, it has almost nothing to do with how much color someone used and everything to do with texture. Makeup doesn't sit on top of nothing. It sits on top of your actual skin, and it will show you in extremely honest detail exactly what condition that skin was in before you started. Dry patches don't disappear under foundation. They get highlighted by it because product clings to flaky texture and makes it more visible, not less. Fine lines don't get smoothed over by concealer. They get emphasized because product settles right into them and draws attention exactly where you didn't want it. This is one of the biggest reasons old money beauty always looks so effortless. The focus isn't on covering imperfect skin. It's on creating healthy looking skin that barely needs covering in the first place. This is where almost everyone goes wrong. And honestly, it's not really anyone's fault because skin prep gets treated like a boring, optional 5-second step you rush through to get to the fun part. Think about painting a wall. You'd never paint straight over a cracked, dusty, uneven surface and expect a smooth finish no matter how expensive the paint is. Your skin is the wall. Under moisturized skin means your makeup will crack and cling to dry patches by midday. Moisturizer applied seconds before your makeup instead of a few minutes before means everything slides around and loses its grip by lunchtime because it never actually had time to absorb. The fix isn't complicated, but it is specific. Moisturize a few minutes before you start your beauty routine. Let it settle fully into your skin, and if you run oily, blot the excess with a tissue rather than skipping moisturizer altogether, because skipping it usually backfires into even more oil later in the day. And here's a mistake that quietly ages a look. And once I say it, you're going to start noticing it everywhere. Piling on thick, heavy primer or foundation to try to erase texture, instead of working with the texture that's actually there. This is where old money beauty separates itself from trend-driven makeup. Instead of trying to erase every pore or line, the goal is to perfect the overall impression while still allowing your skin to look like real skin. Expensive-looking makeup never looks overworked. Old money beauty never tries to erase every pore. It perfects the overall impression while letting skin still look like skin. The goal was never invisible skin, it was even skin. Those are two completely different goals, and mixing them up is a quiet reason so much makeup ends up looking heavier than anyone intended. So keep this in mind because we're coming back to it. The real transformation people are chasing doesn't start with the prettiest lipstick or the most expensive foundation on the shelf. It starts about 5 minutes earlier than you'd think, in the handful of seconds you spend actually letting your skincare absorb before you pick up a single brush. Okay, once that's absorbed, let's talk about the first thing an actual brush touches: foundation. This is where a huge number of makeup mistakes actually begin, and it is rarely about application. It's about the shade itself. Here's a mistake that is unbelievably common: testing your foundation shade on the back of your hand. Your hand is not the same color as your face. Most of the time, it's not even close. The most accurate place to test a shade is along your jawline, blended down onto your neck, in actual daylight near a window if you can manage, because indoor lighting, especially the warm yellow bulbs a lot of bathrooms have, will lie to you every single time. If a shade disappears into your jaw and neck rather than sitting there as a visible line, that's your shade. If you can still see a border, no matter how much you blend, it isn't. But shade isn't only about how light or dark a foundation is, it's about undertone. And this is the part almost nobody explains properly. Two foundations can be the exact same depth and still look completely wrong on you if one leans warm and golden while your skin actually leans cool or neutral, or the other way around. This is very often why a foundation looks flawless under store lighting and then looks slightly grey or slightly orange the second you step outside. If you've ever wondered why a shade that matched perfectly on your hand somehow turned your whole face a different colour in the sun, undertone mismatch is usually the answer. Now, application, because most people genuinely use more foundation than they need, and I say this with so much love, you probably don't need a full face of product every single day for flawless makeup. Try starting with less than you think you need. One of the unwritten rules of old money makeup is restraint. The more natural your complexion looks, the more refined and expensive the entire face appears. Applying it only where you actually want coverage, like the center of your face, then blending outward toward your hairline and jaw, where your skin naturally gets a bit of extra coverage from your hair and doesn't need as much product to begin with. This alone makes foundation look like your skin instead of a mask, because you're not fighting to evenly blend a thick layer across areas that never needed it. And here's a small shift that makes a genuinely massive difference: how you're actually applying it. Wiping foundation on with side-to-side strokes drags product across your skin and can leave streaky, uneven texture, especially anywhere you have visible fine hair. Instead, use a slightly damp sponge and bounce or stipple product into your skin in small, quick motion. That bouncing motion presses foundation into your skin rather than smearing it across the surface. And it's a huge part of why professional makeup reads as skin rather than a layer sitting on top of skin. It costs you maybe 30 extra seconds, and it's one of those makeup hacks that, once you try it, you genuinely never go back from. One more thing here, because it trips up so many people. Building coverage in thin layers beats going for full coverage in one thick layer every single time. If certain areas need more, like redness around the nose or under the brows, add a small amount there after your base layer has had a minute to settle, rather than piling everything on at once. That's why makeup artists working with luxury clients almost always build coverage gradually instead of relying on one heavy application. Now that your base is in place, let's talk concealer, because I see one particular mistake constant, and it's such an easy fix once you know it's happened. A lot of people use the exact same shade under their eyes and over blemishes or redness, but these are actually two different jobs calling for two different approaches. Under your eyes, the goal is bright, so a shade about one tone lighter than your foundation in a formula that isn't too dry tends to lift and open up that whole area. But use that same light shade directly on a blemish or a red pat, and instead of hiding it, you'll actually highlight it, because you're drawing extra light straight to the one spot you were trying to camouflage in the first place. For blemishes and redness, matching your concealer as closely as possible to your actual skin tone, or even going very slightly deeper, blends it into the surrounding skin instead of spotlighting. Here's another one: placement. Most tutorials will tell you to draw a triangle shape under your eye, and honestly that part holds up because it brightens the entire under eye area rather than just the darkest spot, which reads as far more rested than a small dab directly on the center. But the mistake happens right after. In the setting, set concealer with a thick layer of powder immediately, especially in that delicate under eye area, and it can crease into fine lines within a couple of hours, which is the exact opposite of what anyone wants. Instead, let concealer sit for about a minute before you set it, and when you do, use a small fluffy brush with a light dusting of translucent powder, pressed in rather than swept across, only where you actually applied concealer. And here's something barely anyone talks about, but it changes everything. If your concealer tends to crease by midday, try misting a tiny bit of setting spray directly onto your sponge before you press concealer in. It sounds small, but it stops the formula from grabbing onto every fine line the instant it touches your skin. And it's genuinely the difference between concealer that looks smooth at 9 in the morning and concealer that still looks smooth at 5 in the afternoon. Okay, now that your base and concealer are set, we get to the part that decides more than almost anything else whether a full face reads as done in a good way or done in an overdone way. Contour, bronzer, blush, and highlighter. These four get misused constantly because people treat them like separate steps that don't need to talk to each other, when really they're all working together to recreate something your face already does naturally with light and shadow. Start with contour, because this is the one that ages a look the fastest when it's done. Contour is meant to mimic a shadow, and real shadows are never a hard orange-brown stripe running diagonally across the cheek. They're soft, they lean cool or neutral rather than warm and orange, and they only show up where your face would genuinely cast one, like just under the cheekbone, along the sides of the forehead near your hairline, and along the jaw. If you've ever contoured and ended up with what looks like a smudge instead of actual bone structure, it's very often because the product ran too warm, the edges were too harsh, or it landed somewhere a real shadow simply wouldn't fall. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Choose a cool or neutral shade instead of an orange one, place it only where shadow would genuinely occur, and blend until you genuinely cannot find the edge with your finger. Old money beauty isn't about dramatically changing your bone structure, it's about softly enhancing what you already have so people notice your features instead of your contour. Bronzer is a completely different job, even though people constantly confuse the the two. Bronzer isn't about shadow, it's about warmth, the kind of glow you'd naturally pick up from being out in the sun. That means bronzer belongs on the high points of your face the sun would actually hit. The tops of your cheekbones, the bridge of your nose, your forehead, and your chin in a soft, warm shade applied with a light hand. Mixing up contour and bronzer, or using one product to try to do both jobs, is a huge reason so many looks end up either muddy or orange. Think subtle warmth rather than a holiday tan. The goal is healthy elegance, not obvious colour. Blush might be the single most underrated tool for looking younger and more awake, and where you place it matters more than which colour you pick. Applying blush low on the cheek tends to drag the whole face down, which is the opposite of the fresh, lifted look most people want. Instead, smile, find the apples of your cheeks, and sweep colour upward and slightly outward towards your temple. That one adjustment mimics the natural flush you get from being happy or warm, or just walking in from outside, and it reads as healthy rather than done. And here's something most people don't realise. Blush actually works best applied after bronzer and contour, not before, because it needs to sit on top to read as that natural flush, instead of getting muted underneath everything else. If there is one product that quietly makes someone look youthful and well rested, it's blush. Old money makeup favours healthy looking skin over dramatic sculpting every single time. Then there's highlighter, probably the most misunderstood of the four, because a lot of people place it everywhere a shiny product is sold to go, when less is dramatically more here. Highlighter should go exactly where light would naturally hit your face standing near a window. The very tops of your cheekbones, just above your cupid's bow, the inner corners of your eyes, and a small amount along the bridge of your nose. Skip the sides of your nose and anywhere with heavier texture, because highlighter grabs onto texture and can end up emphasizing pores instead of glow. And here's a comparison that might surprise you. The difference between highlighter that looks like glass skin and highlighter that looks greasy is usually not about the product at all. It's about amount. A little, tapped on with your fingertips so your own body heat melts it slightly into your skin, will always look more expensive than a lot swept on with a big fluffy brush. That's exactly why old money makeup almost never looks glittery. Light should appear to come from your skin, not sit on top. Let's move up to your eyes, starting with your brows, because they frame your entire face, and getting them even slightly wrong throws off everything you do afterward, no matter how perfect your eyeshadow is. The biggest brow mistake isn't shape, it's harshness. A lot of people draw brows as one single solid line, which can look noticeably unnatural, especially in photos or bright light. Real brow hair grows in different directions and different lengths, so the goal is mimicking that texture, not drawing a shape. Short feather-like strokes that follow the direction your own hair actually grows will read as your eyebrows, just slightly more defined, instead of reading as clearly drawn on. Old money brows are never overly sculpted. They look groomed, balanced, and effortless, as though you simply woke up with naturally beautiful brows. Here's a mistake that's incredibly common and incredibly fixable: over-plucking or over-shaping to chase whatever brow trend is popular, rather than working with the shape your face already has. Your natural brow shape usually already complements your specific bone structure, so the goal should be enhancing, not fighting it into something else. If you're ever unsure where your brow should start, arch, and end, line up a straight tool from the side of your nose upward. Where it lands is roughly where your brow should start, and angling it toward the outer corner of your eye shows you roughly where it should end. Moving to eye makeup itself, and this is where people get the most overwhelmed, because so much content online assumes one technique fits every eye shape, and it just doesn't. If you have hooded eyes, meaning your lid isn't very visible with your eyes open, packing colour right into the crease actually hides it once your eyes are open. So focusing colour slightly above your natural crease, with the outer corner darker than the inner corner, tends to open the eye up instead of closing it down. If you have monolid eyes, a soft gradient with the darkest colour concentrated along the lash line, blended upward and outward, rather than forcing a crease that isn't there, tends to look far more intense. Downturned eyes benefit from extra definition on the outer corner, with the shadow or liner winged slightly upward, which visually lifts the whole eye. Round eyes often look more elongated with colour concentrated on the outer corners and blended outward rather than all the way around. The point was never to memorise a formula for your exact eye shape. It's understanding that the goal is always working with your eye's natural shape, not against it. Rather than following every trending eye look online, elegant makeup works with your natural features instead of trying to completely reshape them. And then there's mascara, which feels like the simplest step and still trips people up constantly. The biggest mistake is starting application from the middle of your lashes instead of the very base, right where lashes meet your lid. Wiggling the wand gently at the base first, then pulling upward and slightly outward, coats every lash from root to tip and genuinely adds lift, instead of leaving roots bare and tips clumpy. If you tend to get clumps, it's very often not about the mascara itself. It's about layering too much product too quickly. Let each coat dry for about 15 to 20 seconds before you go back in for a second one, and use just the tip of the wand, not the widest part, to separate your outer lashes so you don't end up with one thick clumped mess by the end of the day. Let's come back down to your lips for a second, because they're usually the very last thing applied, and also the thing most people rush through the most. One of the simplest tricks for making lip colour last noticeably longer and look more intentional is lining your lips lips first, even for an everyday makeup look, using a shade close to your natural lip color or your lipstick, then gently blending the inner edge with your fingertip or a small brush before adding color on top. This creates a soft base that helps stop lipstick from feathering into the fine lines around your mouth, and it gives color something to grip onto, so it lasts noticeably longer without constant reapplication. Now let's talk about color harm, because this ties every product we've covered together. Your blush, lip color, and eyeshadow don't need to match exactly, but they do need to feel like they belong in the same family of warm. If your blush leans cool and pink while your lipstick leans warm and orange based, the two can visually fight each other, even if each one looks great sitting in its own packaging. A simple check: hold your blush and lip color next to each other in natural light before applying either. If they feel like they belong on the same color wheel, you're set. If one looks distinctly warmer or cooler than the other, that's very often the quiet reason a full look can feel slightly off, even when you can't quite explain why. Notice how almost every timeless makeup look keeps the lips softly defined rather than dramatically overlined. Subtle refinement almost always ages better than chasing trends. This harmony is one of the reasons old money beauty always feels sophisticated. Nothing competes for attention. Every feature complements the next. And here's something tied to that almost nobody mentioned. The makeup that flatters you under one type of lighting can look completely different under another. Warm, golden indoor light will mute cool-toned makeup, while bright, cool daylight can make warm-toned makeup look slightly heavy or orange. If you get ready under one kind of lighting and spend most of your day under another, that mismatch is very often why your makeup photographs different than it looked in your bathroom mirror that morning. Let's talk about making everything you just did actually last, because there's nothing more frustrating than putting in all that effort in the morning and watching it disappear by early afternoon. The biggest mistake here is treating setting powder like it needs to go everywhere, all over your face in one even layer. It doesn't, and honestly, that's often exactly what makes makeup look flat and powdery instead of fresh. Setting powder is really only needed where you actually get oily throughout the day, which for most people is the T-zone: forehead, nose, and chin. Leaving your cheeks and the outer edges of your face with less powder keeps them looking dewy and lets light bounce naturally off your skin instead of absorbing into a flat matte layer everywhere. Matte everywhere rarely looks luxurious. Allowing some natural dimension to remain is what keeps the complexion looking alive. Setting spray is the other half of this, and the mistake most people make is spraying it on the second they finish, then immediately rubbing their face, touching things up, or getting dressed. Setting spray needs a moment to actually do its job, so give your face about 30 seconds to dry undisturbed before you touch anything or pull a shirt on over your head. Disturb it too soon and you can smudge everything you just carefully placed, which defeats the entire point of using. And here's a check professional makeup artists rely on constantly, and it takes about 10 extra seconds. Before you walk out the door, look at your face in at least 2 different types of light, ideally natural daylight from a window plus 1 artificial light, like your bathroom light or your phone camera. Makeup that looks perfect in one type of lighting can look completely different in another, whether that's foundation oxidizing slightly darker, highlighter looking greasy under flash, or contour looking too obvious under harsh overhead light. Catching that in 10 seconds at home is what actually gives you long-lasting makeup that holds up in photos, not just in the mirror. Now here's something I want to gently push back on, because I think it's the belief that quietly ruins more makeup looks than any single technique mistake we've covered. The idea that more products, more steps, and more time automatically means better result. It doesn't. Some of the most stunning, effortless looking makeup you've ever scrolled past probably used fewer products than you'd guess, applied with real intention, rather than 15 products used quickly just to check a box. If you're someone who feels like you need to do every single step we've talked about every single day just to feel put together, let that pressure go, because it isn't true, and chasing it is exactly what turns a makeup routine into a chore instead of something that actually makes you feel good. And that brings me to something that matters just as much as any technique: how you actually feel while you're doing your makeup. Confidence isn't something that shows up after your makeup is finished. It changes how the whole thing looks while you're doing it. Rushing, being harsh with yourself in the mirror, or picking apart every tiny perceived flaw while you apply product genuinely shows in the final result, because it changes how carefully you blend, how much time you give each step to settle, and whether you're working with your face or fighting it. The people whose makeup looks the most effortless are rarely the most skilled. They're usually just the most relaxed and unhurried while they're doing it, which is what lets every technique we've covered today actually land the way it's supposed to. Okay, I promised you a secret at the very beginning, the one adjustment that changes everything. And here it is, and I think it might surprise you, because it isn't a product at all. It's time. Specifically, giving each layer of your makeup somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds to actually settle before the next one goes on. Skincare before primer, primer before foundation, foundation before concealer, concealer before powder. Every single mistake we've talked about today, cakey foundation, creased concealer, muddy contour, flat powder, gets dramatically better the moment you stop layering products on top of each other while they're still wet and start letting each one grip onto your skin first. It costs maybe 2 extra minutes in your entire routine, and it is genuinely the single biggest difference between makeup that looks rushed and makeup that looks like it was done by someone who does this for a living. You don't need more more product. You don't need a longer routine. You need slightly more patience between the steps you're already doing. So if you take one thing away from everything we've covered, let it be this. The goal was never to look like you're wearing more makeup. It was to look refined, polished, and naturally beautiful. That's the essence of old money beauty. It isn't loud, trendy, or attention-seeking. It's timeless. The best makeup doesn't hide who you are. It simply lets the healthiest, most elegant version of you come through. You don't have to remember everything at once. If you genuinely just pick one thing from this video, maybe it's testing your foundation on your jaw instead of your hand, sweeping blush upward toward your temples instead of low on your cheek, or simply giving your skincare a few extra minutes before you start. And try that one thing tomorrow morning. You're already ahead of where you were before you clicked play. I'd love to know down in the comments which one of these caught you off guard the most, or which mistake you just realized you've been making this whole time. I read through these, and it's honestly a little different for everyone. And if this helped you see your own everyday makeup routine a little differently, hit like so more people who need this actually see it. Subscribe if you want more videos like this that go beyond here's what to do and actually get into here's why it works. And there's another video linked right here that goes deeper into building a routine around your specific skin type. So if you're ready to keep going, that's exactly where I'd head next.